All right, it's March 25th, 7 o'clock. This is the FAA committee meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and first order of business will be a pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item on the agenda is the fiscal year 25 budget, basically specific to the Dudley Charlton Regional School District assessment, and then any other action relative thereto. So before I get into the Dudley Charlton information, John, just kind of since our last meeting, joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, has there been any major changes on the town side of the budget that you need to?
No, there's been no major changes. We're still working on, every day we're working on trying to get better revenue projections. But there haven't been any major changes since the last meeting.
Basically the same budgeted amount.
Yeah, the only adjustment that I made was that the Veteran Services Officer, we're in the midst of renegotiating the IMA with Webster. Mm-hmm. And so I've applied a increase to 50% of his salary that I'm still discussing with Webster, and so that amount changed a little bit, but nothing earth-shattering.
Okay. Revenue projections, no changes in the revenue projections.
I'll put them up. There's been no substantial change, Mr. Chairman.
You go back up. The accountant concurs with this?
Yes, this is from the accountant.
When does DOR going to give us an approval?
DOR wants to be able to annualize, so we're still working to get our reconciled cash together between the accountant and the treasurer's office and submit that to DOR for a final opinion.
Okay. Rich, no, she had nothing.
Good evening. I think what the town administrator wanted to say was, in the fall, when you set up your tax rate, you will have reviewed an entire year's worth of revenue. Again, we're not even 2 weeks out from the past due date on the large excise bill. So you won't have a defensible number until first week in July if you wanted to take a back of the envelope calculation. I think what you're looking for, last year we hit a high water mark with 1.7 million in excise. At the end of the day, it's too much of a variable to guess what's going to come in April, May, June, who knows? Is it enough of an economic downturn where everybody just kind of kicks the can and goes beyond 90 days on an excise bill? Or we've collected it to its fullest? You know, again, your real estate hasn't come in, it's not even due, it doesn't appear until April 1st. The debit for the receipt doesn't even come up in VADAR until that point. So premature to guess on what it's going to be, at least from my end. We're going to send out the nasty pink bills, things like that. You're going to have to do the same thing with your water and your sewer. Remember, all of your water and sewer liens sit on the third quarter of the real estate. So whether or not you have your taxes escrowed, a lot of times it'll clear up the water and sewer with the fourth quarter because there still shows an amount due in the third quarter, which sort of makes whole the water and sewer, but you'd still have that dollar amount outstanding. Same thing when you take a look, the first 6 months for tax title collection are paltry. You've got a lien, it's collectible. If anything, it's saleable. You can sell your liens. So the idea that the money's not rolling in, it's certainly not from me not being despotic to try to get the collections. So everything's liened. We've got the collection letters out there. You know, presumably after April 15th, people will have that revelation that, hey, wait a second, we get a tax refund or something. You get a few more dollars, but it's probably too early to make a declarative statement on what your revenues are going to be. And again, the difference between a 1.7 and trying to defend a 1.8 coming up for the next year, I think Mr. Ruda is right when you go through, and the Department of Revenue are the ones that you need to defend that too. You know, you're looking for a revenue projection. It's too early. I think I don't think I'm hitting the panic button that we're going to end in a negative this year or below what had been projected, but moving forward, you have to put a placeholder somewhere. It's reasonable to assume your collection rate for real estate is going to be similar, maybe a little less, given an increase in the taxes, but it's supposition at this point. I think maybe middle of May you'd have a much better number because we have the second collection, but you know it's not even ink on paper yet. So we're, you know, fingers crossed you get the second commitment, the third commitment, and it's solid, plus all of your deputy collectors. Remember, as much as there could be a mark for non-renewal, if you have a license that renews in 5 years as opposed to 3 years, all of a sudden my tool has now been watered down to the point of, you know, an extra 2 years of grace period.
Do you concur with the estimates that have been made?
I'm taking a look at it for the first time right now.
Okay.
I wasn't
All right,
on,
so then
I wasn't on the most recent DOR call.
Okay.
I'd be happy to review it and.
Oh, I guess I'm asking more about time frame. When you put this budget up with these revenue projections, you gotta get clearance from DOR, correct?
We'll submit these revenue projections to DOR, and if you remember, Mr. Chairman, the rule of thumb has always been not to project
Over
1% at this point.
Right.
And keep it
So
conservative.
when do you need clearance from them? What are our dates?
She usually turns it around pretty quickly. If we still have to go over the warrant and so forth.
Right.
So, as much as we're looking at the town side of the revenue, we're also concerned about the fact that we only have the governor's side of the budget right now to work off of. And, you know, the projections that are made in that don't necessarily always come to fruition, so we have to work.
Well, we're
with-
still
with
early on in this whole
The best
process, so-
information we have at the time is where we're at.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Rich? Or is it-
Not right now.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Rich. Does anybody have any questions on the town side of the budget? Any of the department heads? Chief, any questions about your budget? Paul, here for Dean? Okay. John, any word on the indirects? I'm assuming we're budgeting those indirects,
The indirects for the water sewer.
water, sewer?
We have the Abrahams Group completing a review of the indirects. We've stuck with the number that we budgeted last year
Any,
until that comes through, and
Any
they're
word on
very sensitive and aware of the fact that we're trying to put a budget together, so I think we'll be receiving something from them imminently.
So that could be a big adjustment right there.
Could be.
Come on in, man. Just in time.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move on, unless anybody has any questions on the town side of the budget that you want to go over? Anything on revenues? John, anything? Okay. All right, we'll get into the school side of the budget. So we have, I believe, a recommendation for the budget from the school committee. Kathleen, if you want to speak on it.
Sure. I'm Kathleen Carmignani, Chair of the School Committee. I would just like to say that this is, the superintendent would have been here tonight, but we did not get invited to this meeting. So I just found out about the meeting this afternoon. So unfortunately, we are the only school committee members that could be present. So, so we did vote, and we voted on a $59 million, $885,638 budget, which the total assessment to Dudley is $12,409,049, and that includes the capital of $351,313 for the band interest and bond capital.
Okay. Kathleen, what votes were taken? I'm trying to recall. Was there, I mean, I know the superintendent's recommendation was not that budget.
Correct. And the superintendent's recommendation was to go lower.
Yeah.
However, we, and just forgive me, please let me know if I'm saying anything out of turn. The school committee voted to put this budget forward because it provided a level service budget. And we felt that at this point where we didn't know the numbers yet from the state, we didn't want to start decreasing our budget. So that is where they felt that we've already cut so many positions out of the school system that to go with anything less than a level service at this point would be detrimental to our students.
Okay. So why do you believe that the superintendent went with the other option?
He didn't necessarily go with the other option. He was providing us
He was
information.
recommending, right.
Right, he was providing us recommendations, you know, knowing that we know that this is a tough financial time and that we may need to start decreasing the budget.
Right.
But at this point, when we don't know our information from the state, that we don't want to start with a low number and then keep going lower. Because to go lower than level services at this point just means more cuts on our students.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Kathleen? Kathleen, I don't know if you can answer this or not.
I can try.
At our last joint meeting, brought up something regarding the debt, on the capital debt.
Okay,
And I was trying to get some information on that because the way in which we finance it and the years in which we have to start making payments, there were some options available. And like you said, I guess you weren't invited to this meeting.
and neither
However,
was the superintendent, so
there was,
so
that meeting, there was a meeting that must have taken place. So there was some options that were afforded us
okay.
on the payment. And can you elaborate? Do you know what that meeting was and when it was? And
If it involved capital, Rich, were you invited to that meeting? Okay, he might be able to talk more than I could on it.
okay, it's if you will. Rich, do you have any information on that?
Coming through my binder, one moment.
I can certainly, if you want to have like the next time that you meet, I can certainly talk to our regional finance director and our superintendent to be able to be here.
Well, that's fine. We're going to have more meetings coming
Okay.
up. This is, I mean, we're only in March, it's March 25th, so
Right.
we've got a long ways to go before
Right.
we finalize our numbers and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could get some more information, because that was an important thing for me, because obviously, looking at what we have available this year, a payment that might have been a little bit more beneficial for us to make this year would have been something I would have loved to discuss with somebody. So I'm just wondering how they came to the opinion of the option they picked. And
The option they picked on the capital.
yeah, there were, so I have a thing right here, it kind of breaks out
Okay.
from the Unibank,
Okay.
the options. There were basically 4 options, and I kind of brought it up at our last meeting. And some of the options were immediate interest and principal payments. Some of them, we were able to make some interest payments only, up until a certain date. Those would be a little less than what was decided, and I just was curious as to how that got decided. And I guess Rich can answer it. And
Yeah, because I definitely, I do not
Okay,
know
that's
that.
fine.
I can go back and ask more about that, but maybe we do that.
Zoom call on January
February 1st.
January 31st, but we have a 10th? One moment. So I have the agenda here, January 10th. Outstanding bond notes, 4.2 matures. Zoom call.
Yeah.
It was, Rick Manley was there too, from Unibank.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what else did you want to know?
Well, I just
There-
wanted to
There
know,
was
I
a
mean-
follow-up on the 31st?
Yeah, because I
With the
don't know
Zooms.
if you remember our last meeting, I was asking you about what our options were to pay this back. There were 4 options presented. How we go about picking those options, what is our say in those options?
Well, I think the ship has sailed. There was.
Of course it sailed, because
Hold on, there was the invitation, there was the discussion, there was a follow-up discussion, and now there's the assessment, and it's really part of the bill to be paid. I mean, I don't want to sound terse, but at the end of the day, this is the first time Dudley Charlton ever invited me to sit down and discuss financing options. So I consider that a positive. You know, to the flip side, when there was the renovation for the fields, I received an assessment. It was very polite, it was engaging, but they financed this project based on the October 1st numbers. This is the assessment for the town of Dudley. So I'm not quite certain what the law reads as far as what they're required to do, but there was discussion. It's the first time we ever had something on it. And I understand there is that subtle difference of a lower year 1 payment versus what have you, but again, you know, it was the consensus. You know, it wasn't a Dudley had 44% of the vote, and you know, Town Administrator Golis from Charlton, you know, had the deciding vote. It was a matter of it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and the discussion, you know, I think on both of the calls was, well, it needs to get paid. It was my understanding always that Dudley would be moving forward with a debt exclusion, or at least to request it.
I'll make a comment on the debt exclusion.
Yep,
We're sitting here, Rich, for the first time with
Right.
some finalized numbers. We just got the school's assessment sent to us.
right.
And a week ago, the Board of Selectmen voted to put a debt exclusion on the ballot without recommendation from any of us. So why do you believe this was always an assumption? I mean, we don't even have our final numbers here.
The planning discussion was always to do that, going back 6 months. You're correct. The Board of Selectmen voted in the affirmative to put a debt exclusion out there.
Without recommendation from their own finance committee. Ahead of
That
time,
is-
without
that is-
knowing the numbers.
That is a very important point. It's, the message given to me was that this would be the plan. We are not in the position that Charlton is in to write the $1 million check to go through and lower a principal amount or take care of.
Well, we don't know that. We're making that assumption.
They had prepaid some of
They did.
some of it.
What I'm saying is, putting a debt exclusion on a ballot before you know what your numbers are is the horse before the cart.
Again, to my first point, this was not at the discretion of the town of Dudley, nor was it of the discretion at the town of Charlton. We were invited to discuss the funding option. At the end of the day, it is a project that was approved by Dudley voters, Charlton voters, school committee, so on and so forth. So this is a bill coming. They had us there as a courtesy.
Well,
And I agree. I think the difference between year one and year two of, for argument's sake, $100,000 is a good discussion to have. At the end of the day, I didn't write off like an outlaw and decide, well, let's get this done. It really wasn't mine to say yay or nay to. It was the consensus of the call, and the tone of both calls were cash flow for the district. At the end of the day, you will still receive what your district agreement states, the 10, 15%, and the due dates. The capital gets added onto it. So if there's a larger capital number and they did a cash flow out, at one point the district is going to be minus X because the assessments come in but money comes out the door. So the presumption is you'd want to make sure that there was enough breathing room in the district budget to go through and go minus X on whatever it was for the upcoming year.
all right, well, the only thing I'm disappointed in is that the FAA, the members of the FAA, Town of Dudley,
I
were
would
not
not
brought
be,
to the table to
I wouldn't speak as to.
even have a discussion.
I was the invited guest to attend this. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I wish
I
we had
agree.
the opportunity at least to speak on some of these options, considering the financial situation Dudley is in. It would have been nice to know, but we have the number now. That's been decided for us. And it's already been decided before we take our recommendations that this is going to be a tax increase. I love that. All right. Thanks, Rich.
I mean, were you looking for a particular comment? I mean,
No, I was just wondering if-
at the end of the day, I was at both meetings. I was, again, invited as the guest.
Yeah.
Really, there was no option to pass to the third year or what have you.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Kathleen, to interrupt you. Does anybody have any questions for Kathleen? Well, she's here on the budget. But, oh, okay.
I do have a question. No. So, general question. During last year's budget, there was the discussion that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education had allowed certain factors, increases in certain items, and the allowable costs from the state level to be charged by vendors, special education, the out-of-district. There was a unique number when it came to inflation. There are some things that are out of control, out of the individual unit's control. And I'll raise my hand. The best example, and I think Mr. Ruda had mentioned this in the budget process, Worcester Regional provides an assessment to the town, and there's a funding schedule, and there's an interest rate to which they are funding it out to the 2036 mark. The question is, what easily identifiable costs have come in from outside of the district, specifically from the state, or maybe at a federal level? And I'll add on to that, at one point, Medicare reimbursement and federal, the monies that you received for the lunches, if there are any noteworthy increases or changes. And I'm sorry, I didn't have any preface for this, but if you don't immediately have an answer, would you be able to come back with some of them?
Love answering on the spot on that one. Okay, so I will say there's a couple drivers in the budget, in that we have a minimal increase in Chapter 70 state aid of $30 per student, where last year we had, I believe, 60 per student, if I remember right. So if we don't achieve that 60 per student, that's going to decrease our revenue as well. The state's projecting an 80% reimbursement rate for regional transportation, which last year we were at a 90% interest rate. This current year we're at a 90% interest rate, so that's almost $100,000, give or take, in a swing as well. And then, just as you are experiencing, the healthcare costs increase as well. The out-of-district costs are, I don't believe, are increasing more than that 14% increase that we had last year. So we were able to kind of stay stable on that, because we're paying for that. But I think that was pretty much it. I mean, really, we believe that, we have our counselor positions that we are keeping in there at this point, and we think that that's much needed. And that was from the ESSER funding. And really, we've tried to account for that any kind of financial cliff we were going to have, we've really accounted for those. We do need to have our assistant superintendent position restored. So that was one that I know that people are talking about. So, is there anything else?
Anybody have any questions for Kathleen?
I do, actually.
Yeah, sure.
So, so far, it seems like all of the numbers and all the paperwork that we've received regarding the district budget, and I understand why, but most of it has been like summary statements of like what the increases are going to be, what they're going towards. Is there any possibility that we can get like a full overview of the ins and outs so that we can kind of take a look at those, like?
And when you say ins and outs, you want more than, you want like a general ledger? What?
Kind of, yeah. So like at that joint meeting that we kind of had at the beginning of February, was that the beginning of February already? Or was the end? I forgot what it was.
February 14th, it was Valentine's Day.
Yes, that's right, it was Valentine's Day. The back half of the meeting was going over all the specifics per building for last year's budget against the fiscal 23 budget, I believe. Or at least that was the paperwork that we were given. It was fiscal 23 alongside what the actuals for FY 24 kind of were shaking out to be. Do we have something like that for fiscal 25?
I thought it was on the website. I can go check that. 'Cause
Yeah,
it might
so-
have been in our last packet.
Okay.
But you want actuals. Okay.
I know, and it probably seems really nitpicky, but we're
Well,
getting
that's our job,
those-
and we need to be nitpicky.
That is true.
Absolutely.
But especially where like all of the other municipal departments have been providing these like individual line items, just for us to take a look at and kind of see where those increases are. I think it might make it easier for us to defend when we have to also say like, yes, this is what the increase is, like this is what we're looking
Right.
at.
Yep.
It's just more, I want to err on the side of more information than less.
She's talking more like, do you see how like they have their sheets like this?
Yeah.
She's talking more about that. Like, and we have those sheets, we have those that we can provide.
Plus, we're doing an audit too, we're gonna have somebody come in and.
Well, yeah, correct. Yeah, we did just vote to have an auditing firm come for May.
And that's for an operational audit, less than a financial audit, or
I think it's for both.
it's for both?
Yeah, and then we're having, we're working with DOR, who's gonna then come in the fall and do more of an audit.
Okay.
But they were in line with what, they were happy to see that we were having the other audit done as well,
Yeah.
so. Okay, so I can get you more of that information. Yeah, if you want it that detailed, you can have it that detailed. The one thing I think is really, and I think before I got on the school committee, things I didn't understand, like, and I think the public may not understand, like, when you look at our numbers, it looks like it's a 13% increase. But truly, it's only a 4.36% increase on the budget, on the overall budget. So that's kind of hard for people to understand. And so when you have, we have certain liabilities to, like, we have to pay contractual obligations. And with those and increased costs of insurance, you're going to be higher than a 2%. And even a 2% increase would be more than, would be, like, if going down to an assessment level would be high. So I think that's where we are. And I think, we're trying to work with the state and kind of lobby as much as we can to get those regional numbers up, so.
I appreciate it.
No, we do too. And I think, I'm glad that we're gonna be doing the audit, because I think it'll show the public, we're not cash rich. Like, we'll look at areas that we need to improve on and hopefully find some ways that we can improve.
Yeah. And I know before he left, like, it seemed like Rich Matthew was doing as much as he could to, like, get those lower contracts in place to impact the budget less and all of those things. And
Yeah, correct. Like, we had the solar funding, the solar panels coming on, which we hope will have an increase, will have a substantial decrease in our costs, going forward. So, yeah, we're trying as much as we can in any area we can to do some decreases and have some savings. But I think, we need to understand that, like, by the public not voting for that, for Shepherd Hills, we're also gonna be looking at capital costs there in the future, so we need to think about those. It's not a pretty picture. So, sorry to be the Debbie Downer.
it's already better than last year, so.
Little.
Agreed, it is better than last year, that is the best. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do you have anything you want to add, Mr. Administrator?
I'll just mention, Mr. Chairman, you and I have discussed it a little bit, but publicly, I want everyone to know that DOR and slash DLS has also already begun the management review audit of the town of Dudley as well. So we're doing the same thing that the school district has done, is work looking to do in October.
Ann, you have any questions? Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I'm not going to speak for anybody else on the FAA, but I'll give you my personal opinion here. You do realize the precarious situation the town of Dudley is in. our budget, Mr. Reuter has pretty much held the budget to level funding, very close. So there's not a lot of leeway there. We're injecting about 150,000 in cash into that budget, Mr. Reuter?
Free cash, correct?
Cash, which basically leaves us, and that was kind of based on a placeholder of about a 2.5% increase in the school assessment. I don't even think that it counted the capital, right? The capital projects.
No, it was $250,000. It was exactly
a
that
placeholder.
placeholder.
So where do we go beyond that for the town of Dudley? So that puts us into, the only thing we can do is use what we have in savings to make up the difference, which would be stabilization. And I do really appreciate the school committee's efforts in picking that budget. I fully understand what's needed. It's important, I get it. However, we as FAA, we have to be concerned about the town, the entire, where this money comes from. And not only do we got to be worried about this year, but I always look into the future. I always look a year into the future, and I say, well, can we handle this year, but what comes up next year? And with this, the 12,409,000, that becomes the new assessment, right, going forward. If we go with that, there'll be a little debt, some of the debt will be paid off, but that will be the new assessment. And the problem we're running into is that the budget for the school is now, it's going up geometrically because of being the largest part of our budget. Any increase in the 4%, 5%, 6% increase is a massive increase, and we all know that. So we need to be very careful as to how we go forward. I would be more inclined, and I know the school committee would probably be against this, but obviously they are. But I'd be more inclined of looking at the superintendent, what he said he recommends, and I know it's below what you want. But if we're at that level, I feel we can handle it, not only this year, but potentially into next year. I don't want to run into a problem where we get to next year and we've used up a lot of our cash, and now we're back. We just had an override. Schools, library, police, fire. We had an override. I don't want to be back in 12 months from now and saying we're cutting the library, we're cutting all these departments because we're out of money, and the school budget is still going this way. So I want to be very cautious right now, and I know it's only May 25th, and there's a lot going on between now and then, but I want to be very cautious. So my recommendation, and I'm not speaking for anybody else on the FAA, would be to go with the second option right now, and that would be the 12,145. So that would be at this point.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, with that option, that cuts any like middle school foreign language.
Yeah.
It cuts our busing after school,
Right.
like to some degree. We're gonna have to add fees. So I think that, yeah, there's going to be an impact. And I understand, it's a problem, yes, we understand that. And when we're trying to work together, I have 4 members from Charlton and 3 from Dudley. And the conversation, I want to be truthful about it. It was, we're ready to go to a super meeting. And, my standpoint, and I think Maureen as well, and Caitlin, was that, no, let's see what the numbers come in at to see how much we can reduce and be fiscally responsible by that.
Again, we're early on.
Right.
So we have to kind of look at what we have early on.
Right.
And I understand the budgeting you guys have to go through.
Right. I really, I've heard from selectmen I've heard from other townspeople that they've had conversations with different people about the need for an assistant superintendent. And I just have to say, publicly, our administration's drowning. I mean, our administration is Steve LaMarche, and he can't run the school district by himself. And that particular position brought in grant money in excess of $1 million over the past few years. So if we don't have that position, then we don't have someone that's maintaining that grant, asking for getting that kind of money. And honestly, looking at how our students are improving over time. We're already being audited by the state for being in compliant with least restrictive environments. So we're getting into the portion where we're starting to have some issues.
Right.
And not having the workforce that we need for our students is causing that. So.
No, and I totally sympathize
Yeah.
with the position
Yeah.
you guys are in. I really do.
Yeah.
And you know them for the education.
Absolutely, and I am too.
education.
And I'm also, I also live in the town and understand we need to make sure that we're all going in the forward direction.
Right.
And, we understand that we are the biggest part of your budget.
Right.
So.
It's a difficult decision because, going forward, the question then becomes, what's tradable, a teacher or a firefighter, a teacher or a police officer down the road? I mean.
Well, I think that's a little unfair.
Well,
I don't want
I'm
to
just trying to say.
point myself against
but
somebody,
But money's money, right? It comes down to money.
Money's money, but we also have mandates from the state that the state is not fulfilling.
Exactly.
And I think we need to get people to get on board with,
Right.
Getting our elected officials at the state level to start recognizing that we need funds.
Now, you said you're something about the chapter 70 funding. What?
Right, I think right now we're projecting it at 30, where I think last year we were at 60. And this is where I wish Steve was here, I'm sorry. But that, that's per student. So that's gonna be, we're hoping that we can get into that higher level. But it's all this state formula that I feel like I need a doctor to understand.
All right, so then that brings me to my next
Okay.
my next issue, which you're probably not going to like this one.
Well, we'll see. Go ahead.
So, listen, I know it's very early. Again, I'm mentioning it's very early on, right?
Yep.
But when you guys are putting your budget together, and I understand the reasoning for it, but so you're pulling numbers from what you think is available, right? So right out of the gate, all we have right now is the governor's proposed budget, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So, and I've read the budget. It's,
Okay.
you know how governor's budgets work, right?
Right.
The paper is outhouse wallpaper, is what it is, a governor's budget. It never passes a governor's budget. The numbers you're pulling off of her budget, one big number that you're assessing to the town is the transportation. So right now, in her budget, she level funds it at about 99 million. So
What percentage did she give on it? Because we
there's no
budgeted-
percentage. Basically,
We budgeted at 80%.
what the MTA has said is, these are the contracts we have with the transportation in the regional school system. So therefore, this is the bill. She's only funding at 99 million. Therefore, we don't have enough. So we're only gonna be able to reimburse about 80% of your bill. So that's where that number's coming from.
Okay.
And that's part of your budget. So a large part of this now, and it's, what is it, 257,000 of your assessment, it's a large part.
Huge.
Of your assessment to the town is based on the governor's early budget. And I'm confident that doesn't remain that way. I
You
mean,
think it's gonna go lower?
no, absolutely
Oh.
not.
Right, you're thinking it'll go higher percentage.
Well, they were supposed to have, the education commissioner was supposed to have a meeting, I believe today,
Okay.
with the House Ways and Means. That hasn't taken place yet. So we gotta wait until that happens.
Correct.
once the Ways and Means comes up with their number, now, and Ann, you could probably.
I'm shaking my head, yeah.
So Ways and Means now comes out with their budget, and at this point, every advocacy group is courting all of these guys and all these women that are up there. They are, and all the education advocacy groups are there. Your MTA is up there. Once this thing is hashed out and goes to the floor, there's amendments on it. I don't think my opinion is that budget, that transportation reimbursement's not gonna live. Not even close.
You think it's gonna go,
I believe it's gonna be probably 100%, but I'll go in between and say 90% reimbursement. So I believe that budget will go from 99 million to about 125 million.
okay, so, right, so we're right now at 80%.
Right, so,
Lowballed it, and we're hoping it goes to 90%, and then
Right.
that is why we didn't vote for the lower amount, because when we figure out that number, we're gonna be able to recalculate the need for what we need from
Right.
you.
well, I'm just saying, in the assessment, so we're making a decision, we would have to make a recommendation on that assessment part of it, of the 257. So, which I don't think is a correct assessment. I don't think you're correct on that.
No, we don't, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
That's why we're, at this point, that is as best as we can know.
Right.
And when we have the final assessment, we'll be able to revote that.
But the question is, when is the actual final assessment?
You know, I mean, we're hoping,
You hope before May, but that ain't gonna happen.
right, we hope before May, and if we need to reassess it come July and reduce
So
it, we would.
the question is, if we leave the 257 in your assessment,
Right.
instead of saying, no, it's gonna be funded at least at 90%, minimum. If we pull that assessment out, we can always come back and adjust that assessment up if, for some reason, you only get to 80%. But if we don't, if we leave that in there and you get the 90% reimbursement, where's the money go after that? Is it? That's what I'm worried about.
Oh, you're worried that we're gonna take the money?
Well, well, well,
Okay.
a lot of black holes money goes into
All right,
it.
I mean,
I'm not worried about you stealing the money.
I think we have tried to work, like, at least as long as I've been on the committee, we're trying to work in good faith with both towns.
Right.
And at this point, this was the best estimate we had. And we voted on it based on this. And that is why we voted at the level service budget. We know that if we can reduce it, we will. I mean, at least I personally will vote for it if it can be reduced. I can't speak on how the other members will vote.
Okay.
You know, that's all I can speak on is my own vote.
So, with your own vote,
My own vote. Go ahead.
if we were to put and agree with the school committee's assessment and pulled the transportation out and level fund that, would you be in agreement with that?
So you want to just reduce the assessment by about 100,000? Is that what you're thinking?
No, by 257. At minimum, that puts you at the B budget, and you're gonna get the reimbursement anyway. We're early on right now.
Right, we're early on right now.
So if we move to recommend your A budget with level funding the transportation,
From last year's amount.
so in other words, you're taking the increase of 1,471,005 and you're subtracting out 257,892. That would be the assessment to Dudley. Anybody have a calculator? Yeah, take the 140.
I would rather have, like, regional financing is lovely, but it's not my degree.
Right.
And I would rather have my finance director come and talk to you about, like, because I understand what you're trying to do. You wanted to say, okay, well, whatever the bill is, you know, we're gonna take, you're gonna give us, you know, the 90%, like, think about it as 90% and not the 80%, right, is what you're trying to do.
I'm, in budgeting, I'm confident that it's gonna be probably more than that this time around. So,
And, yeah.
we have a
that-
lot of advocates going for this.
Right,
Listen, and I'm not gonna get into the politics, but
right,
you know who supported and got the governor elected and a lot of the legislators elected. There's a lot of money in that. There's a lot of advocates for the education department not to cut that transportation budget. I cannot foresee that transportation budget being cut down to 80% for all the regional schools. It just doesn't make sense to me. So,
doesn't make sense, no. When do you need to know the?
we don't need to know anything until town meeting, right?
Well, we need to know, I need to know what my blood pressure will be before that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all our
think-
blood pressures are not gonna be
I
okay.
would like to see what hits the floor first.
The floor
After
of-
it comes out of the House Ways and Means.
And that's
it's the
what we wanna
floor,
do.
And I think late April, May, yeah,
Budget week for House is the last week of April.
Last week of April?
And last week of May for Senate.
so, and then it's gonna go over there. I like to see what they offer, but before then, I think budgeting this and seeing that we're, you know, you're short that much in transportation,
Mr. Chairman, we can certainly wait till the last minute, as long as we want to do a meeting. This has to be posted 7 days before the meeting.
right.
And I think we were obligated to give it to you so many days in advance.
Yeah.
So we were meeting our first obligation, but we know that, you know, come April, come May, like, we can readjust this as needed.
And again, I'm looking for not just next year. And the only way we can do this over a 2-year period, you're talking about $1 million worth of stabilization transfers here for this budget. If we're gonna run into this problem next year. You know what our tax ability to raise taxes on.
Correct.
We're gonna be completely broke, and we just asked for an override.
Right.
I don't know if that would ever be successful again, not for a while anyway. So, I want to be very cautious as to what we spend out of stabilization here.
Correct.
So that's why I'm a little more optimistic on the transportation budget. So,
And we want to be optimistic, but
Right,
we
I
felt
know
that
you
by
have your
putting
own.
it in there at 90%, that wasn't where we should be at this point.
right. I mean, and you're only talking, they're at 99, at 80% at 99. If you do the math, it's about 125 million is really where that budget would be to be at 90%. And I'm pretty confident that 25 million is gonna be added to that budget, so. I could be wrong, though.
I enjoy your
It's all
confidence.
guessing, right? Does anybody have any comments on where they want to go with this at this time?
I think things are so uncertain on the state level right now. I mean, we're losing $1 billion in revenue. I think it was like the longest history, like in 20 years of like every single month losing a couple $1 million, so.
Let me do some math here.
Do you feel that we're gonna know by the first week of April anything more that we can, like, because I think our next meeting's April 10th. Do you think we're gonna have a better picture on April 10th, or do you think at this point we're,
I would say,
You should
Dan would
wait
be
it
more
out.
the expert on this than I am, but
I don't know.
I don't think we're gonna have a full budget till September, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But we will have better numbers known, at least for your chapter 70 reimbursement. That could be better than, I got a feeling it's gonna be better anyway.
we are all fingers crossed.
Right, so,
Right.
that's why I wanna be cautious now by, making recommendations on the budget now. And we can always, as we see the numbers come in, we can come back up, because this is not, what do we make a recommendation on tonight? It's not gonna be necessarily the recommendation that goes forward to town meetings.
Right, and from our standpoint, we felt that the 59,885,000 was our ceiling number at that point. and we know it will only go down based on transportation and things like that.
So, trying to think of,
Do you have to have a recommendation today?
I mean,
I
we
mean, because
can-
we're so uncertain.
well, I'd like to have something to go to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay,
I would too, Mr. Chairman.
okay,
So what?
I definitely would too.
Just something to go to the Board of Selectmen and let them ponder it too.
sure.
At this particular time, I personally, and I'm like I said, I'm not speaking for anybody else, and anybody wants to make a motion for something else, I personally would go with budget B minus the transportation, level funding transportation. So that would be,
You want to go lower than the option for B.
yes, at this time,
Okay.
I would be comfortable with the 1,207,000 with a subtraction from the transportation of 257. That would put it at, that, the assessment would be then at 950. If it goes at 950, we would be looking at, even at even if it was that, and it's,
So you want me to cut you want me to cut after-school things?
I don't want you to cut anything right now.
No, and I'm sorry, but that's where we would be. We would be cutting the middle school foreign language and all that, and then you also want to decrease the transportation fund.
I don't want to decrease it at all. I just don't want to, I don't accept the school
saying.
committee's.
That's all I'm saying.
I don't accept the school committee's budgeting of that.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay,
That's what I don't want to cut it.
but taking option B would cut that.
All right, so let's. How much more is that? So if we went with option A and I subtract out the transportation, you'd be looking at 1,213,166. That's almost identical to what your budget B is with the transportation in it. So all we're talking about
It's level.
would be hoping the numbers come better for transportation
So
reimbursement.
you said 1,213,000, and what was it?
166.
Okay,
And again, the Board of Selectmen would have to, I mean, I would have to get them, well, that's just me. I don't know if anybody on the
Correct.
FAA even agrees with that. That would then, for us,
so that's the level service budget minus the transportation increase, is what you're talking.
you know,
Okay.
so that would be, for the town of Dudley, in order for us to handle that,
Yep.
you'd be looking for cash transfer out of our stabilization of $940,000,
And what is your stabilization account right now?
$1 million.
Oh, okay,
That ends it.
okay,
Now, we do have a capital stabilization, but we have commitments going forward on some of that money too. So
okay.
come back next year, you start at this assessment level, even if it's a 3% increase, we don't have the money to pay for it.
Right.
We just don't have the money. We don't raise that kind of money, so trying to be very cautious here.
Just
How we-
the right-
Yeah,
Huh?
1,213,000?
Yeah, 1213,166.
Yeah. Write that down.
So what do you guys, any opinion on any of this?
I agree with you,
Yeah. On the A budget?
yeah,
Minus,
yeah.
big transfer from stable. Of course, the selectmen have to, they put it on the ballot, so
Correct,
they
and-
can
and, I
take that
mean-
recommendation or not.
I hope that we get 60, like, I hope that things increase from the state and that we can even be
Right.
less than
Yeah,
that.
right. Okay.
That would be the best.
All right, well, we have a number.
Okay, so what was the final number for the total assessment?
So it's your assessment,
Right,
1,471,058, subtracting out
right, so it's 1,213,000.
the shortfall for transportation reimbursement of 257,892,
Okay.
which puts us at an assessment at 1,213,166.
That's not the assessment, that's the increase in assessment.
The increase.
The increase, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
The increase in the assessment.
Okay. So do you need to?
Obviously, there is a capital project mixed in the mix there, and the
Right.
Board of Selectmen are putting that on the ballot. I don't know if that will pass, but that would, if it did, it would obviously help
Offset
offset
that.
some of the stabilization money that we'd be committing, but it puts, just letting you guys know, this puts Dudley in a huge bind going into next year,
And if it doesn't pass, what happens?
if what doesn't pass.
The capital?
If the debt exclusion doesn't pass?
So it comes out of stable then?
Yeah, it would, so, Mr. Chairman, we'd be budgeting the entire increase. And then, after the question was put to the voters, that decision would be made, and if it passes, then we're in much better shape than.
Right, I got the firstborn
We
chip
can put
where
that
I always
back into
worry, like, in
stable, yeah.
case it doesn't pass, what does that look like?
Yeah, there's no, we're gonna go in with a balanced budget, eyes wide open this year, no question. Eyes wide open.
Right.
And I think we need to make sure that we're all saying the same message, like when we totally finalize this, so that the public understands the importance of that debt exclusion.
Right. And it was one of the reasons why I asked earlier about the process of the debt exclusion. How can we, not the debt exclusion, but the actual capital payment. I was really preferring to put this forward a year to see what we end up with, rather than that big hit right now. So, Rich, you have a question?
My apologies. One interesting note about this debt exclusion, this is the first time I can remember, or most recently, where the authorization on a district-wide vote was not hand in hand with a debt exclusion to pay for what's being authorized. So we looked up previously, the town clerk and I, when they went through and did the field renovation, it was one question, second question. Before that, there was a sewer line going through, and I think that was successive as well. For whatever reason, the authorization in September of 2022 did not have the immediate, yes, this is a great project, would like you to approve it, let's figure out how to pay for it, and then have that context of, yes, when the project is done, this is how the town is going to manage the debt on the DE1. I think that's an important item to note. I don't have an answer why one question went on without the other, but it's a unique circumstance. I know we circled back to, how does that get paid, and the if-then statements of a debt exclusion's failure. But an interesting takeaway should be that previously both questions had been rather close as far as timing goes, so that there was, if there was the groundswell of approval that said, yes, let's do this project, let's pay for it with a debt exclusion, which is a little different because you needed a second debt exclusion vote to get your fire station done. So for what that's worth.
Thank you, Rich. Well, as far as the debt exclusion on that, that's not our purview. We don't make that decision to throw that on the ballot. That's, we have to go within our budget, what we actually have for money, not what we wish, well, what we think may happen on that end of it, so. So I guess that would be what I would, at this time, would, my personal recommendation would be that number right there, the 1213.
Okay, and that's something I can take back to the school committee.
Right, and I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of pushback because you're budgeting on the governor's budget based on what she put into transportation. I get it, I understand that you have to do that, but I'm just confident that that will be there, come May, or at
Okay.
least.
So
some-
that, for us to bring that back, that has to get voted through you and then through the selectmen, that is what you're asking for? Or do you want
I think
us,
so, right? No.
do you need me to hold a meeting and vote that and change this?
Well, I mean, you haven't had anything from Charlton yet, right?
Right, I think we're meeting with Charlton next week or the week after.
So it all depends
Okay.
on, what they want to do too. I mean,
Okay.
We're saying option A, we're not taking back from option A. You guys feel that's the best course of action.
Right.
The only difference was in your budgeting for transportation reimbursement. That's the only change that I would want to make to that assessment, so.
Okay. So do you vote on that?
I mean,
Okay.
if somebody wants to make a motion on that, that's, it's up to, anybody want to make a motion, so, I mean.
Move to make this recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and I'll plug it into their budget, and then they can act on it, because we don't want to have conflicting, we don't want to give Mrs. Carmignani conflicting numbers until we've met with the Board of Selectmen, I think. There's probably only so many bites of the apple that we want to take back to the school committee, so do you want to maybe vote to make that recommendation for the draft FY25 budget?
Yeah,
and I'll bring that to the Board of Selectmen.
I'm suggesting that the amount is $1,213,166. That's what I'm suggesting. So if somebody on the FA wants the motion, that's the approved amount at this time.
The approved amount of increase.
Approved amount of the increase. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. All right. I knew somebody was going to speak up.
I'll make a motion to put forward, an increase in the assessment, instead to $1,213,166.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion on that?
I'm going to just add to that discussion, Mr. Chairman, that the logic behind it is the transportation assessment.
That's it.
We believe that the number is understated right now as to what the final amount will be to the district.
Correct.
And when I say we, I don't mean me.
No, that's how you're speaking
It's an
for.
FAA thing.
Right. I mean, I think we kind of beat that horse to death so far. So that is the logic reasoning, is because we don't agree with your,
Okay.
and again, I agree with the way you budget.
Yep.
Because you have to go with what numbers you know, not what numbers you guess, but we're not in agreement with that particular reimbursement number. So that's why we're lowering the amount down. All right, any more discussion on it? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Unanimous.
Okay, well, I'll take that back to the superintendent and the committee.
Can you do it after the gala?
Nah, nope. I'm gonna sit next to your wife.
Okay. All right, so is there any other discussion? We don't have any other discussion needed on this budget so far. Not yet, no, okay. So now we'll move to the proposed warrant, draft proposed warrant.
It's very rough
Rudy,
draft.
you wanna kind of walk through some of this with us, and, because we're not gonna make any recommendations tonight on this.
Right, when I say rough draft, I was thinking more in terms of just giving it to the FAA to take a look at before the next meeting, because some of the stuff we can go over could change dramatically, could be removed, could be, I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up as to what's coming. I'm happy to put it up on the,
So 1 and 2 is, that's just housekeeping. Article 3 is what we just discussed. Article 4 is your spending limits in your accounts. That's all that is.
yeah. And what I did was, Mr. Chairman, just so you know what I'm thinking, in case there are any questions in between meetings. For example, Rich is, the treasurer collector is making a transfer for an unpaid bill, and we need to just find out how we're gonna make that transfer. Rich may have a better idea by the time we get to the next meeting. But, again, that's not something that we're gonna vote on tonight or decide tonight.
That's Article 7.
That's Article 7.
Okay.
I put my recommendations for the FAA and for the board in there just so you can ask questions if you say, why are you thinking this, or why do you want to defer it? There are a lot of spending articles that I think we can defer to October in order to, Mr. Chairman, keep our budget, as in check as possible this year.
Well, I just spent your budget.
Well, we really haven't, because I pulled out things that we generally would include in the budget, and I think it's a good idea to let the town meeting decide as to whether or not they wanna make those expenditures or not. Grant and project design, we say every year that, for example, we budget $50,000 so that we can go after grants, whether it's, matching funds or the need to do some project engineering and design in order to complete the grant application. That always yields way more money than $45,000. We usually get $1 million a year easily from grants. But again, there's not a lot of places I can pull out of our budget, so I put that onto the warrant for the town meeting to make a decision as to whether or not they want us to aggressively go after grants this year. There's a planning board articles. There's a ton of petition articles in here that my recommendation would be probably to refer back to the petitioner for all of them. We have a street acceptance for St. Anthony's. I just need more information to put that article together. The police chief has a solicitor's bylaw on there for approval. What else? We've been talking about the water line around Eagle Drive. There's a rough draft article in there that lacks a lot of information in a public meeting in order to communicate the information that's necessary, I think, to have people vote yes or no on that article. That's Article 14.
Wow, we get a lot of citizens petitions.
We got a lot of citizens
Holy
petitions.
cow. Rich?
I had one question, and the town administrator had sort of touched upon it. I want to say at the fall town meeting, something was ruled out of order. It was a zoning bylaw because the planning board hadn't held a requisite public hearing on it. So that was going to be the question through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ruda. We have or would have recommendations as to what would require a public hearing ahead of the vote, just for argument's sake. So if you're one of the very modest petitioners who has a great idea and, you know, it just sort of dies on the vine, the town would be able to point out that, yes, article, you know, fill in the blank, Article 50, because there isn't one, would require planning board approval, review by the highway commissioners, which are the Board of Selectmen, so on and so forth. You know, whatever public hearing should be held on, to get an approval on a town meeting warrant article, it would be listed so. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, you know, hopefully
And
we
we'll
can
probably
have
do,
it.
and we'll definitely do that, Mr. Chairman. I know that Bill Scanlon's all over it in terms of planning board articles, but we're going to probably have public input and public hearings on articles that may not necessarily legally require hearings, because I think there's a lot on here to digest. You know, for example, the police chief should have an opportunity to talk about his suggested bylaw publicly in advance of the town meeting floor, and you know, we're gonna over communicate this here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on? John, what do you, you know, some of these you want to defer to the fall. What do you, how much here, did you add these numbers up for what you think this is gonna be for spring?
I
Obviously,
didn't,
every one of these is gonna have to be capital improvement stabilization account transfers.
well, in the,
Many of them, anyway.
there'll have to be capital improvement. I think that the cruiser will be capital improvement. And the regulatory and compliance will be capital improvement, because we can't wait on that one.
How much is that one?
Right now, it's 85,000. The ones that I'm suggesting we defer would hopefully come from free cash prior to a deposit of the balance into stabilization in October.
It's a long ways off on that one. We don't have any idea what that is. Let's hope the revenue number.
Oh, for free cash?
Yeah.
No, not yet. I think we're doing pretty well this year, Mr. Chairman.
No. Anybody have any? Oh, John's gone. Anybody have any questions here?
No, pretty interesting.
Guess I'll wait for John to come back so you guys can kind of read through this stuff. Any other comments, Mr. Administrator?
Not really, Mr. Chairman. Some of these articles, Mr.
The
Chairman.
one article I don't see on here would be the actual police. Do we need to put that one on? The patrol car that was already voted on?
We need the source of funding for it, Mr.
Because
Chairman.
we changed the amount, capital improvement, so does that need to be, that needs to be an article, right?
I think we're gonna have enough, I think we're gonna have enough this year when we do end of year transfers, so that the chief can get that extra 14,000 that was
Right, but
approved.
does that need to go up on the warrant?
No. We can transfer that amount into a line item.
Okay. So any questions on it? And just to let you guys know, you know, capital improvement did meet also, and approved, the, new administrative car for the police chief. So that will be on
Okay.
So I did approve about $60,000.
Right.
And the work downstairs will not be on the ballot.
Correct.
Okay.
On the warrant, right.
On the warrant. Okay. And that was the only thing that
Yeah,
capital
it's,
improvement had.
Mr. Chairman, it's good you brought that out, that the Capital Improvement Committee, we had a multi-year plan to replace cruisers, and by the time we got to this last one, as everyone
Prices have
knows,
gone through the roof.
car prices have gone through the roof, so instead of looking for additional funding within, we're gonna try to use what's left in this year to offset that amount. That's why I was talking about transferring the money this year into one of his line
Well,
items.
60 of it was debt excluded
60
already.
60 was approved, debt
The
excluded.
last car was already
right.
debt excluded, but the prices have gone up significantly, so we're gonna be looking, what, another 10, 14? Time's up. All right, does anybody have any other questions?
I'll do that.
Does anybody wanna?
I make
Um,
a motion to adjourn?
Before you do that,
Okay.
just wanna discuss, we've got our recommendations for the budget for now.
Correct.
We can schedule a meeting, whether it's a joint meeting or we have our own meeting again, when we get some better. So we don't need to do it within the next 2 weeks then, right? I can.
No, I think, Mr. Chairman, we got a good grip on it here at the FAA, and we'll just, it's time to bring the Board of Selectmen in on it and come
See
to
what they think.
come to an agreement.
Okay, all right. We have a motion to adjourn then?
Make a motion to adjourn?
All right,
Second?
all right, all in favor? Aye, all right. Adjourned.